Good evening, everybody. Tonight's lesson is L'zecher Nishmas Imi Moirasi Rivka Bas Harav Reb Shloimeh. We are studying tonight Tractate Pesachim, chapter 9. Okay. Mi shahaya tamei oiv derech rechoika v'lei asas harishon yasas hasheni. The Mishnah here tells us the following. A person who was tamei, he was ritually contaminated, or he was bederech rechoika. We'll explain what that means soon, but literally it means he was far away from the Beis HaMikdash on the 14th of Nisan, and he was unable to do the Karban Pesach. He was unable to perform the Karban Pesach on the 14th, because the law is a person who is tamei cannot perform the Karban Pesach unless there's an unusual circumstance in which 51% of the Jewish people or the Kohanim are impure. In that case, the contamination is suspended. But here we're talking about a usual case, a normal case where people are bringing it in purity and not in impurity. So such a person, even though he missed out on the first Pesach, nevertheless he can make up and he can have a Karban Pesach ritual done on the second Pesach, which is the 14th of Iyar, a month later. Shoga goy nenas v'liyasas harishon yasas hasheni. What happens if a person erred, or he, or due to unforeseen circumstances, he wasn't able to, or circumstances beyond his control, he wasn't able to do the Karban Pesach on the first Pesach? Yasas Hasheni, so he is able to do it on the second Pesach, known again as Pesach Sheni. So now, the Mishnah asks a question. Hold on 1 second. First, the Torah tells us, Tamei oiv derech rechoika. The Torah uses the term, he was tamei, or far away. Now you're telling me not only if he was tamei and he was far away, but other circumstances where he wasn't able to perform the Karban Pesach on the first proper time, which is on the 14th day of Nisan, he nevertheless can do it on the second. So what's the difference? Why would the Torah specify those two? Im kain lama nemer tamei. Why does the Torah specify that these are the cases in which a person has the ability to make it up on the second Pesach? Says the Mishnah, answers the Mishnah, she'elu p'turim min hakares. A person who was tamei or who was far away, he's pater from kares. He's pater from the punishment of kares.
Of not bringing it.
Kares is spiritual excision, and the Karban Pesach, performing the Karban Pesach, and Bris Milah are the two only mitzvahs that if you don't perform them, you can get kares. All other scenarios of kares are you have to actually do something. There's not a sheva al tas. It's not like you could sit back and then you can incur the kares penalty. A person who sits his whole life without getting a bris milah incurs kares.
Wow.
So it's a sheva al tasa. Karban Pesach is the other one. If you just sit back and you don't do something, you can nevertheless get kares. So in the earlier cases, a person who was bederech rechoika or he was tamei, even if he didn't bring it on the second, for whatever reason, so he still wouldn't get kares. He's just missing an opportunity to make up what he missed. But a person who just erred or for whatever reason didn't bring it, and it wasn't for those two reasons, if he doesn't bring it on the first and he doesn't bring it on the second, he will incur the kares penalty.
There's no alternative.
After that, there's no alternative.
The original alternative was
Karban Pesach.
It was Karban Pesach Sheni.
Correct.
Was for those that for the Chaver Kadisha.
That's correct. So these were the people who were tamei due to handling the bones of Yosef. So that was the original case in the Torah. The original case in the Torah was that people who were tamei for handling the bones of Yosef, they came and complained to Moshe and said, why should we miss out? Lama nigara, why should we miss out? We're doing a mitzvah, and now we can't, we're prevented from bringing a Karban Pesach. So Moshe went to Hashem, and Hashem said, they're right. We have a second opportunity, which is the second Pesach. In any case, if for the first two reasons that are mentioned in the Mishnah, you wouldn't incur the kares penalty if you failed to bring it on the second Pesach. But for the other reasons, but the other ones, other reasons that prevented you from bringing the Karban Pesach on the first, if you don't bring it on the second, you're going to incur the kares penalty. Mishnah Beis. The Mishnah here seeks to clarify exactly what it means. You were in a far away. Far away is a relative term. So what does that mean? Far away from where? How far is far away? How far is considered far away? Says the Mishnah in Hamoidim Velachutz. From the place of Modim. Modim is a place in Eretz Yisrael. From there and onward is considered far. And that distance in all directions. Now, exactly how far that is, subject to a small dispute, 15 or 16 mil. 15 or 16 mil. Mil is it's, I don't know how many miles that
11 miles, according to the translation.
That's what it says there. Okay.
8.5 to almost 11 miles.
8.5 to 11 miles. That depends on how large a cubit is. There's a dispute about that as well. So in any case, anywhere between 8.5 and 11. Thank you. 11 miles away. So in every direction. So if you're beyond that, according to this opinion in the Mishnah, then you are exempt from bringing the Karban Pesach because you're considered far away, and now you have an opportunity to do it on the second, to perform the Pesach sacrifice on the second Pesach, on Pesach Sheni. Divrei Rabbi Akiva. So this is the opinion of the first opinion in the Mishnah, which is the words of Rabbi Akiva. However, there's a dispute here. Rabbi Eliezer says, he says that far away doesn't actually mean far away. It means from beyond the threshold of the temple courtyard. And Rabbi Yossi supports this idea, and he explains further. Rabbi Yossi says, Lefichach nokud al hay. In the Torah says b'derech rechoika, or if you're far away. Rechoika ends with the letter hey. Now there are certain places in the Torah, not too many, but certain places in the Torah where we have dots over the letters. Vayishokeyu, for example, is a famous one. Yaakov and Esav, they kissed each other. Whenever there's dots, it's coming to teach you and tell you that it's not exactly how it appears. You need to look into oral tradition and find out exactly what happened. We're not giving you the full story. That's what the dots are there for. So it's kind of like in English language, you would put in quotation marks. I was very tired. I'm just giving an example. So that means I wasn't tired, I was just claiming to be tired, or some other reason beyond what we're saying here. So the same thing here, when you have a dot on top of letters, literally in the Torah, written in the Torah scroll, it means something more than what's written here. And so Rabbi Yossi says that that's exactly what that dot means. That when we say far, it doesn't mean far like 11 miles or 8 miles. It means far, you're outside of where you're supposed to be. Where are you supposed to be? You're supposed to be within the threshold of the temple courtyard. And since you're outside of that, you're considered far away, and you fall under that category. So, let's read it in the Mishnah. Rabbi Yossi lefichach nogat al hay. Therefore, the hay of Rechoika has a dot over it. Leimer, to tell us, loy mipnei sherechoika vadi, not because he's actually far, elam me'iskupas hazara velachutz. Rather, you're beyond the threshold of the temple courtyard. Now, the Mishnah Gimel seeks to give us the differences and delineate the differences between the original Karban Pesach that was brought where?
In Egypt.
In Egypt. Very good. I just want to make sure you're
I was paying attention.
paying attention.
Like decades.
There you go. In Egypt. And the rest of them. Okay. Ma bin Pesach Rishon L'Sheni. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm scratch that. That's a further Mishnah. Ma bein Pesach Rishon L'Sheni. What is the difference between Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni? the 14th of Nisan and the 14th of Iyar. Harishon aser b'val yiro v'al yemotzi. On the 14th day of Nisan, the regular Pesach, the korban Pesach may not be brought while you have chametz still in your possession. V'hasheni, but when you bring the korban Pesach on Pesach Sheni, matzav chametz imay baboyis, he can own chametz in his house and he can have it in his possession. It's not an issue at all. L'chatchila, he's allowed to have chametz. Harishain toin halal b'achilasi. The first one on Pesach, the one that's done on the eve of Pesach, you have to recite halal when you're eating the korban Pesach. V'hasheni eini ton un halal b'achilasi. But when you perform the korban Pesach on Pesach Sheni, you don't need to recite halal when you're eating it. However, zev v'zeh tu'un and halal b'asiyasan. Both of these cases, both the first Pesach and the second Pesach, you need to recite halal when you're performing the ritual, not when you're eating it. V'nechelin, in both cases, tzali, they're both eaten roasted. Al matzeh, samaridim, you eat it together with matzah and murr, v'dechenes haShabbos, and in both of these cases, you supersede Shabbos to perform the Pesach sacrifice ritual. Now, another difference that's not brought in here, but the Melechus Shlomi explains that in the first Pesach, during the first Pesach, the proper Pesach, Pesach Rishon, if 51% of the Jewish population or the 51% of the Kohanim are contaminated, ritually contaminated, they're impure, they're tamei, so we bring the korban Pesach regardless. However, in the second Pesach, that's not the case. Okay.
What's not the case?
We do, meaning to say, let's say 51% of the Jewish population or 51% of the Kohanim are impure on the Pesach Sheni. We do not suspend the Tumah and bring the korban Pesach anyway.
So you don't do it at all?
You don't do it at all on the second Pesach, correct, on such a case.
And then the person who was going to do it is subject to Kores?
No, then they're dismissed from that also. We read that earlier, I believe.
I guess you have to be there.
I reserve my commentary because it's not so simple. Okay, Daled. Mishnah Daled. HaPesach Shabbat B'tumah. What happens in the scenario that we just described? A korban Pesach that's brought when 51% of the Jewish people are impure, and so anyone who's impure is allowed to bring the korban Pesach regardless. So in such a case, the Mishnah here is going to tell us that not all contaminations will still allow a person to bring the korban Pesach. Only contamination that is that is incurred from somebody who touched a dead body. But other types, as we're going to explain, are not exempt. HaPesach Shabbat B'tumah, a korban Pesach that's brought when the majority of the population is impure. Lo yochlu mimenu zavin v'zaves. A person who is a zav or a zava, a person which is in a case of a male, he has a male discharge. It's a semen-like discharge, but it's not semen. As was my father explained last week, something that would a discharge that would be the like of that which comes from prostatitis, or a zava. A zava is a woman who menstruates outside the days that she would be ordinarily expecting her period. So that becomes a zava. There's differences between one sighting, two sightings, and three sightings. That's not for the discussion here. But in any case, you have a zav and a zava, a male zav and a female zav. A nida v'yeledis. A nida is a woman who menstruates and has not yet gone to the mikvah. And a yeledis, yildes, is a woman who gives birth. A woman who gives birth starts off in days of impurity. Again, this is not a discussion where we're going to have great detail here. There's many other areas within the Mishnah where we can give more details to it. But in any case, a woman who gives birth is impure for a period of time.
Women brought the korban?
Women would bring a korban. Women would eat a carbon
Partake.
Pesach. Women would also can also bring a carbon Pesach. Technically, ultimately, as we're going to find out later, women didn't bring it themselves. They brought it together with other people. But yes, women brought a carbon Pesach. Women participated in carbon Pesach. So now a woman who had just given birth in the last 7 or 14 days, depending on whether it was a boy or a girl, she's impure. And so these types of impurities are not suspended when 51% of the population is impure. And so therefore they still would be not allowed to eat the carbon Pesach and participate in it. However, v'im achlu, if they did go ahead and eat from the carbon Pesach, even though they were impure from these other types of contaminations, P'turim mikares, they would not incur the kares penalty. Ordinarily speaking, a person who is impure and takes part of a carbon Pesach gets kares. You're not allowed to partake while you are impure. But in this case, because the carbon Pesach was brought in impurity in general, so this severe level is suspended. And so although they're not allowed to eat from it, if they do eat from it, they don't get kares.
But I just wanted to ask, when the Torah is referring to 51%, it's not
Doesn't mean
51%.
it doesn't mean 51%. It could be 50% and a little bit.
Okay, but my question is, it's only referring to the people that are actually in the Azar. It's not referring to the entire nation. There's no way for them to know.
Well, Bezdin finds out. That's exactly what they do.
So it's not just the population that's there.
Yeah, what do you mean in the Azar? How do they get into the Azar if they're impure?
Interesting.
Now, Rabbi Eliezer, he furthers this idea. Not only would they not be subject to the kares penalty for eating from a sacrifice that they shouldn't have, Afal Bias Migdash, even if they actually entered into the Beis HaMikdash, meaning to say, though Azav and Azava and Anida and a Yeledis, all of the aforementioned people who have impurity, even if they actually went into the Beis HaMikdash, they also would not be subject to the kares penalty. You're not allowed to go into the Beis HaMikdash when you're impure, except on circumstances when the majority of people are impure and we're suspending impurity. Impurity is a relative term and it can be suspended under certain circumstances.
That goes for a number of things, right? Not just this.
There are other things that are brought in impurity, other carbonates, certain other carbonates that are brought in impurity. But this is the only one that's eaten in impurity. And so, according to Rabbi Eliezer says that also for going in. Now, the pasuk that tells us that you can't go in, it says that they should send out anybody of the Bnei Yisrael that's a Mitzayra or a Zav and whoever is contaminated by a dead body. So, because they're all bundled together, so according to Rabbi Eliezer, he says that when is a person who is a Zav and a Zava who enters into the, or a Yeledis or a Nida, if they enter into the temple courtyard, they are liable for the kares penalty. Only when a person who also is who is contaminated by the dead also would be subject to that penalty, because they're all bundled together. But when one of them is exempt, in such a case, which is a case of a carbon Pesach, people who are tamei lemeis, people who are tamei because of the defilement, because of contact with a dead body, those people are allowed in this circumstance to go there.
Are you considered a tummy mace if you were in a building that somebody
Yes,
died in?
yes. And again, that's I don't want to get into too many details there.
No, I don't.
That's a very difficult tractate of Ahles.
No, I don't want to
we'll
get into
to
that,
it
but
in
I'm
the right
saying,
time.
so is that what they're referring to when they say a large population of people got tummy? Is it because of tummy mace?
Tummy mace, that's what we're talking about. Yes. At 51%, over 50% of the population is tummy for tumas mace. So then we suspend the law. So according to Eliezer, because they're bundled together in the pasuk, so therefore he says once it's suspended for one, the kares penalty is suspended for all of them. However, the halacha is not according to Rabbi Eliezer. Okay. Mishnah Hey. Ma bin Pesach Mitzrayim lefesach doris. What is the difference between the carbon Pesach that they brought in Mitzrayim and in Egypt? This is what we were talking about before, and the one that was done in the future generations. Pesach Mitzrayim mikoche mi be'asar. The carbon Pesach that was brought in Mitzrayim had to be purchased on the 10th day of Nisan. B'ton hazo ba'agodas ezav al hamashkef al shtei hamzuzes, and it required they took a bunch of hyssop and they dipped it in the blood and they put it on the lintel and on the doorposts. V'nechol b'chipozin, and it had to be eaten in haste. They eat it quickly. B'layla echad, and the Pesach was celebrated in one night. So the 16th of Pesach on the first year was no longer Pesach. They can eat their chametz and it was no longer Pesach. Ufesach deiros neik kol shiva, but the celebration of Pesach is celebrated for 7 days in all future years. Okay, Mishnah Vav.
Did you leave Pesach Sheni already?
Yeah, why, you have questions? Go for it.
So what happens now? What's Pesach Sheni for now?
So Pesach Sheni now is celebrated in a very small way. It's commemorated, first of all, we don't say Tachnun, because it's a quasi Yom Tov, it's a small Yom Tov. We're allowed to perform all labor, of course, just like we are on any other day. But it's a small Yom Tov, and we commemorate it today by eating a little bit of matzah. The Rebbe would make a farbrengen always a Pesach Sheni, and the Hasidic concept of Pesach Sheni is that it's never too late. You know, people think you missed an opportunity and you can't make it up. Mm-hmm. There's always a way to make something up. You can always catch up. That's the lesson of Pesach Sheni, and that's its commemoration and its application today. Other than that, there is no further application beyond that. Okay, Mishnah Vav. Amar Rabbi Yeshua said, Shamati shetmuras haPesach kreva, smuras haPesach eine kreva, ve'ein li lefarish. I heard that a temura substitute for a carbon Pesach is actually sacrificed, and I heard also that a substitute for a carbon Pesach is not sacrificed. Ve'ein li lefarish, and I don't know how to explain this apparent discrepancy. He heard two different things. So how do we explain this? Now, what does it mean, tmurase? The law is as follows. When you have a carbon, we just had this in the daily Rambam, in the daily Sefer HaMitzvahs laws. When you have a carbon, you cannot take the sanctity of one carbon and put it onto another one. You're not allowed to do that. However, if you do that, both are holy. He was tmurase kodesh. Both become holy. Now, so he heard that a tmura, a person had designated a carbon Pesach, and then said, okay, you know what, I'm going to put the holiness, I'm going to move the sanctity to another one. So now he heard that we can bring these sacrifices, and he also heard that you can't bring these sacrifices. So he's looking for clarification.
So wait. He put the sanctity on two different animals.
So
for
now,
the same person?
I'll explain in a minute. Amar Rabbi Akiva explains what he had heard. Ani afarish, I'll explain to you the discrepancy of what you had heard. HaPesach shenimtza kodim shchitas HaPesach. What happened here? A person had a carbon Pesach. He designated lamb A as a carbon for Pesach, and then he lost it. Now he lost it, so he needs to find another. He needs to designate another one. He can't just not bring one, so he gets another one. But now what happens is he finds the second one before he slaughters. He finds the original one before he slaughters the second one. So says Rabbi Akiva, Yira Acha Yistoiv. So both of these. Well, first we're starting with the first one. The first one has to be left to pasture until it contracts a blemish. Then we sell it. Once it's contracts a blemish, now it can't be used as a carbon. Now we could sell it and take away its holiness onto money. Take that money, v'yikach b'dam of shlamim, and now we can use that money for a shlamim, a peace offering. V'chein tmurasi, and the same with the second one. The second one, both of these cannot be brought as a carbon Pesach, and let me explain to you why. Because once you reject a carbon, when you reject a carbon, it becomes rejected. It gets that label rejected. Okay? Now, the one that you designated in its stead also now takes on the same status as the first one, and it's rejected. And so you can't bring either of them. So what do you got to do? You got to let both of them get a blemish, and then buy shlamim sacrifices with those funds. And then now, you're going to end up with the third carbon, which is going to be your carbon Pesach. However, achar shchitas Pesach. So in other words, the carbon Pesach and its substitute both cannot be brought. However, once you slaughtered achar shchitas Pesach, but once you slaughtered the second one, so you had a carbon Pesach, and you lost it, and you designated a second one, and now you find the first one. So now the first one wasn't rejected.
Yeah.
The first one wasn't rejected because it was here and it was rejected.
You lost it.
We lost it, and so I was forced to get another one. So now the first one doesn't take on the category of rejected. So the second one takes on the status of the first one. So the second one is not rejected.
Wow.
So the second one can be brought as a shlamim sacrifice.
Interesting.
And the first one now also could be brought as a shlamim sacrifice.
So the first one becomes a shlamim sacrifice, not a carbon Pesach?
No. And now a third one.
And now a third one becomes the carbon Pesach.
There you go. V'chein t'murasi. So the difference between the first case and the second case, in the first case, none of these could be brought as sacrifices altogether. We have to
wait for them.
We
to
have
get
to
a blemish,
redeem them. We have to get a blemish, redeem them,
and shlamim.
and then bring a shlamim. Here, these actual sacrifices that were designated will be brought as a carbon shlamim. There you go. Mishnah Zayin. Hamafresh nekeva lefischoi ezacherpen shtei shonim. Person who designates an inappropriate sacrifice for his carbon Pesach, for example, if he designates a female, the carbon Pesach has to be a yearling male. Oizachar ben shtei shonim, or if it's in its second year. So yira ad sheistoev, so he has to be left to pasture until it gets a blemish. V'machar, and it is sold. V'yiplu damav lenedava, and its money is given as a donation to the donation chest in the Beis Hamikdash. Hamafresh pischei v'meis, person who sets aside a carbon Pesach for himself, and he dies. So now what happens is this carbon Pesach is ownerless. An ownerless carbon Pesach is disqualified. So his son, who had now inherited this carbon Pesach, cannot use this for a carbon Pesach for himself. It's disqualified from becoming a Pesach offering. However, it's not disqualified altogether. Ela l'shem shlamim, you can only bring it as a shlamim sacrifice. And that's because it was ownerless. An ownerless a carbon Pesach that is designated as a carbon Pesach and then becomes ownerless can no longer be brought as a carbon Pesach.
Shlamim is what?
Shlamim is a peace offering. Ches. Ha-Pesach shenis arev bazvachim. A carbon Pesach that gets mixed up with other sacrifices, other animals that were designated as a sacrifice. So now, what do? Kulon yiru ad she'ista avu. All of them need to be left. So let's say it's 1 in 5. One carbon Pesach gets mixed up in 5 or 6 shlamim sacrifices, by way of example. So all of them need to be left to get a blemish. Yimachru, and then they're sold. And so now we have 5 different sacrifices here. Or let's make it more simple. Let's say we have 2 sacrifices. You have a carbon Pesach and, for example, a shlamim. So now these 2 get mixed up. I don't know which one is which. So we let him get a blemish. We sell it. And now the money, the value, they're never exact equal, or they're usually not an exact equally expensive, right? But we don't know which one was which. So we have to bring the value of the more expensive one for both sacrifices. Otherwise, one of the sacrifices may be getting cheated. You following?
So it's.
Let's say one was worth $5 and one was worth $10.
You have to bring.
So you have to bring two
$10.
Two $10 sacrifices, so that neither of these sacrifices would be possibly lacking. And the person who mixed these two up, he's the one who has to pay those extra funds.
So you're going to be very focused on making sure they're separate.
Yeah, you should be focused on which one it is. Okay. Nesarev ba b'chayres. However, what happens if it was mixed in with firstborns? Firstborn animals are slaughtered and they're given to the Kohanim. The Kohanim eat it. It's a meiser it's b'char behema. So Rabbi Shimon Eimer im chavuras kohanim yechelu. So if it's a group of Kohanim, so first of all, we don't have to worry about how we're going to sacrifice these things because we don't have to let them get a mum because the blood applications and is exactly the same for a carbon Pesach as it is for a carbon Bechar. And so therefore both can be brought, and the group, if they're a group of Kohanim, the group of Kohanim can now eat both of these.
Wow.
And they'll say, well, if this one is a carbon Pesach, so then I'm eating this l'shem mitzvah, and the other one is my right because I'm a Bechar. I can eat the carbon Bechar, and if the other one is the Bechar, so then that's the one that I'm going to be eating for the mitzvah. Okay, Tess Chavura Sha'avat Pischa. Now, what happens when a group of people? We've explained in previous chapters that in order to be partake in a carbon Pesach, you have to be registered on that carbon Pesach. So what happens? You have a group of people and they all register on a carbon Pesach and it gets lost. They don't know what to do. They say to one of the people from the group, let's say there's 10 people in the group, Mr. Number 1, say go find another carbon Pesach for us and slaughter it for us. We're keeping the same group together. Okay. He goes, he finds, and he slaughters. But in the meantime, they didn't know where the guy went, and it was getting late, and so they decided that they also got a different one, and they also did. So if his one, it turns out they say, what time did you slaughter your carbon Pesach? It says, 5 o'clock. Oh, we did it at 5:30. So So then the first one, which was the one that this agent,
The original one.
the original fellow, the fellow who was sent out
Yeah.
as a shliach, so he partakes in it and they partake with him. Why? Because they appointed him to do this on their behalf, and he did it on their behalf. But if it turns out that they, time-wise, the 9 other people, they had sacrificed theirs first, slaughtered theirs first, so they eat from what they had slaughtered. But he eats from what he slaughtered because he never appointed them to slaughter for him. And they obviously deregistered themselves by the very nature of the fact that they slaughtered another animal.
Not to mention the fact that they deregistered him because he went to go find an
They
animal.
didn't necessarily deregister him because they didn't know what his story was, but they deregistered themselves by the fact that they slaughtered something else. Now, what happens if we don't know which one was slaughtered first? Or if they both were slaughtered at the same time. You slaughtered at 5 o'clock, I also slaughtered at 5 o'clock. Okay. Now we have a problem. Because we don't know which one was first. And so he obviously deregistered himself. He had nothing to do with theirs.
But they had something to do
But they
with
had to do
his.
something with his, because perhaps his was slaughtered first, and now they would be not allowed to. So theirs has to go to the burning ash pile. His is a valid one for sure.
He gets to eat his.
He gets to eat his. But since perhaps they had fulfilled their mission, they do not try. They are not allowed to bring a carbon on Pesach Sheni, because Pesach Sheni is only for somebody who certainly didn't bring a carbon Pesach, but not for somebody who possibly didn't.
So their sacrifice just goes.
Goes kaput.
Gets burnt
Yes,
off,
it's
and
burnt
then-
off.
and they're putter from doing it again.
We're going to pick up the pace here. We have another 10 minutes, 5-6 minutes. Amr lahem, if he says to them, "Imecharti tzu v'shachatu alai, halachu matzah v'shachat v'him lachu v'shachatu." But what happens if he actually did give them the right to slaughter on his behalf? He says, "If I'm late, you do it for me." So now both of them end up slaughtering a carbon Pesach, So im shalahem nishchat rishon, if the general groups was slaughtered first, heim oichlim shalahem, they eat from their own. Who oichlimam, and he eats with them because he had given them the license to include him in their carbon. Im shalai nishchat rishon, but if his was slaughtered first, hu oichlim shalai, he eats from his own. Heim oichlim shalahem, and they eat from their own. So if similar cases before, if it was at the same time or they don't know when it was, so the group they eat from their own, because whether he found it or didn't find it is not relevant to them. They slaughtered on their own intentionally, but he doesn't know, and so since it's a doubt in his case, it's a doubt. So therefore, his one is going to go to the ash pile, and he will not be able to do a carbon Pesach on the second Pesach, and they will fulfill their obligation. So let's just read it inside. They eat from theirs. He does not eat with them. His goes to the ash pile. And he is exempt from performing the carbon Pesach on the second Pesach. What if he told them, he said to them,
we'll all eat from the first one. That's.
If both of them appointed each other to sacrifice from whatever they got first, so whichever one it turns out was sacrificed earlier, so then we eat from that one. But if we don't know which one, so each one has possibly fulfilled their obligation with the other ones and possibly not. So so both are going to go to garbage, to the ash pile, and both will be exempt from Pesach Sheni. If they neither gave instruction to the other, they just split up, so then they're split up. That's formally split up. The 9 eat by themselves, and he eats by himself, and there's no issue one with the other. Now, the 9th and 10th, the 9th, let's go with the 9th Mishnah. I'm sorry, with the 10th Mishnah. What happens if two groups of people, their carbon Pesachs become intermingled, mixed up? So So what do we do? So now we can't just everybody back off of all of them and each one take one. Because then for a moment, these carbon Pesachs would be ownerless, and if it's ownerless, it can no longer be brought as a carbon Pesach.
Because it was
already designated.
Yeah.
So each one takes one from each party of people, and they swap teams. So each one sends one person to the other team. Im shalanu Pesach hazeh yadecha meshuchis mishalach v'nimnes al shalanu. Im shalach shalcha hu Pesach hazeh yadeinu meshuchis mishalanu v'nimnenu al shalach. So basically, what they do is each one takes a person and goes to the other side, and then they say, if this Pesach was from yours originally, so we're dismissing ourselves from our side and we're going to you. If it was really